Hi everyone. I just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce you to the last thing that you will do in English 9 this year, and that is the research writing project. It is your quarter 4 project. You'll have all month to work on it in class, but you'll definitely need to spend some time outside of class working on it as well. So the objective is for you to be able to compare abstract concepts based on research of reliable sources and organize your ideas in writing that demonstrates a compelling conclusion. So there's a lot to that objective. Let's unpack it. Your grade will be based on 4 elements. You will need to follow the research writing process that is part of the score. You will need to find credible information on a topic. You'll hear me say credible or reliable over and over again. If your sources are not credible, then you will have a lower score. You will need to use MLA formatting for your paper and for your citation guidelines, and there is a brief presentation of your work to the class. So let's take a look at the topic. We've been talking a lot about how to do community service in a way that doesn't insult people, in a way that doesn't exclude people, in a way that doesn't make people submissive or other or put them down. So the topic that is broad, this is the broad topic that you will get started with and then have to narrow down on your own through your research, is this. How do we engage in responsible service to others? The kind that maintains human dignity and equal respect among all involved. Conduct research into this topic. Compare examples of responsible and irresponsible service to others. Use your findings to write a 3 to 5 page MLA formatted research paper that supports a conclusion you are able to draw from and support with your research findings. 3 to 5 pages is not long, because it's typed, double-spaced, 12-point font. So you really need to be concise. I will not take more than 5 pages. So what will you submit? The first part of what you will submit includes your final copy that comes in on top, printed on paper. Underneath that, printed, is your rough draft with evidence of revision and editing. Underneath that is your pre-write or outline. And on the bottom are something called research evidence cards, which I'll talk about a little bit later. In addition to that, please note that you're going to turn in your final copy digitally on Turnitin.com. Also, you will present a 3 to 5 minute concise summary of your research findings. You need to include at least 3 images to illustrate your ideas. These can be large posters, these can be on a PowerPoint slide, but the images should help us understand the abstract concepts that you're talking about. And you need to be able to field questions from the audience about your research. So next, I want to talk about the process. So the research process has several parts. You'll notice that there's 7 gears here in this image about the research process. So let's talk about them. Number 1, you need to decide on your topic. And you might be thinking, wait a second, you gave me a topic, you gave me a prompt. Actually, what I gave you is a broad topic to research. You have to narrow that topic down and focus on a specific example that illustrates one specific way to answer the question in the prompt. Do some preliminary research to start finding specific examples of serving others done with the preservation of dignity and without. So I'm going to talk a lot about preliminary research versus focused research. So in your preliminary research, you need to start with taking a look at many different types of service before you narrow it down to the one type of service that you're interested in researching. Once you have narrowed your topic down to the one type of service you're interested in researching, you're ready to move on to step 2. Step 2 is focused research. Narrow the topic in order to narrow search parameters. Once you have done some research and found many examples of respectful and disrespectful service, decide which specific comparison you will focus on in your paper. Then conduct further research on that single service comparison to deepen your understanding of the issues involved. Altogether, you probably will have watched or read, I would say, 8 to 10 different pieces of reliable research that you've conducted, but your paper will end up maybe with 3 to 5 of those things. You're not going to actually use all of the research that you conducted, and most of your preliminary research will not make it into your final paper. Step 3, you need to create a research question based on the focused research you did on the one type of service that you decided to focus on in your paper. What specific question about preserving dignity in service will your research seek to answer? How will your evidence of respectful and disrespectful service provide an answer to that question? The answer to your research question is your paper's thesis. The question does not show up in your paper, only the answer does. But when we conference one-on-one, I'm going to be helping you craft your research question and asking you how your research is going to help you support an answer. Remember, your research is meant to support your own inference, which you support with research. I don't want a list of research. This is not a report of you doing research. This is you using some research to defend an idea that you've synthesized from multiple pieces of research that is your own unique idea and your own unique contribution to the world of community service done right. Step 5, determine what kind of sources are best for your argument. You've done, like I said, preliminary and focused research. You will not use every source you have found. You need to determine the best support for your narrowed topic and limit your supporting evidence to the most reliable, most relevant pieces of information. Complete an evidence card for each piece of evidence you plan to use in your paper. Be prepared to use parenthetical or in-text citations that match your full text citations on your works cited page. You could have an evidence card or multiple evidence cards for one source. For example, we just read 3 Days to See by Helen Keller. Maybe you take part of a sentence from the first paragraph and part of a sentence from the third paragraph. Now you have 2 pieces of evidence, 2 separate evidence cards from the same source. Step 6, create your works cited page as you gather information, as you gather your references and sources. Your works cited page must be in MLA format. That means it is the last page of your final draft. It doesn't include any of the actual paper on it. It is a page by itself and says works cited at the top and includes your MLA page number with last name in the upper right-hand corner. Your list of full citations should appear in alphabetical order using a hanging indent, and the information included in each citation should be in MLA citation form. You should only list citations that are also cited parenthetically within your paper. Conversely, any citation that you put parenthetically within your paper must be reflected in the works cited page. Nothing that is not in both can be in your paper. And last step, now that you have all of your source information, you're ready to go through the TAP Narrow Focus process, organize your evidence into different categories, name and number those categories, write your rough draft, revise it, edit it, and turn it in. You will compose a rough draft, get peer and teacher feedback on it, and make changes before submitting your work. Be sure to submit all of your work, including your research note cards, pre-write or outline, rough draft, and final copy. Make sure these documents are submitted in the correct order. Upload a copy of your final draft to turn it in. So at this point, I want to make sure that it's really clear that you have 2 separate submissions of your final copy. One that I'm going to score on Turnitin, and the other one that I need to keep and on file for MEB. Also, I just want to point out that you are going through the writing process once you've done your initial research. So if you don't remember TAP Narrow Focus, that this is a good time for you to go back into Google Classroom and get a refresher on it. I haven't taken those documents down. And finally, you really want to pay attention to due dates. There will be a solid week where I'll be conferencing with individuals. If you want my feedback on your rough draft, it is very important for you to have finished your rough draft on time. If you do not finish your rough draft on time, you can have feedback from me on your pre-write or your outline. But if that's not done either, you won't get feedback from me before you turn this in. And as this is the end of the year, there will be no redos. So you really need to make sure that you're doing your work on time this time. So let's talk about evidence cards. In prep year, you were taught to use evidence cards. I know this because I'm teaching prep writing and I'm teaching using evidence cards. So argument number at the top of the evidence card refers to the body paragraph that you are going to use this evidence to support. You may not know that until after you've written all of your evidence cards and organized them in the way that you want them organized. Then you put either your quoted material or a paraphrase, and here's the really important part, the explanation of relevance. This is where you use your logic and reasoning to explain how the quoted material makes your thesis true. And last, you want to list your MLA full text citation. Notice that here it says that you need to use a minimum of 3 different reliable sources. Minimum. That is an important word. Think about it in terms of grades. Do you want the minimum passing grade? If so, 3 reliable sources in your paper is fine. If you want a higher than minimum grade, you should probably read the rubric carefully for the grade that you want and adjust accordingly. You need to have 1 card per piece of evidence. This means you could have more than 1 evidence card per source. Evidence cards can be typed on Word or Google document, and one document can hold multiple cards. I've also included in Google Classroom a template for you to use. However, I like to write them on note cards so I can actually manipulate them and move them around as I'm planning, so you could do it that way as well. Ultimately, you want to be concise. Limit the quoted material to short sentences, or better yet, parts of sentences, because you want to embed evidence in quoted material, not list it as if it were floating disconnected from your own ideas. Your paper should reflect your own ideas. Evidence is merely meant to support your ideas. Evidence should not comprise the majority of each paragraph. Now let's talk briefly about the presentation. Typically, researchers publish their work, adding to the world's knowledge. When a research article is undergoing the publication process, it is peer-reviewed, which means that other experts in the field judge the researcher's work to determine if it is credible and valuable to the field. Similarly, master's and doctoral candidates must defend their extensive research projects as an important step in earning their university degrees. As part of this research project, you must also publish your work. Here are the guidelines. Do not read your research paper to me. Instead, you must summarize your work. Your presentation should include at least 3 images that support aspects of your summary. Minimal text can be included, if any, but it should be included with the images used briefly not very much text. Really, it's better to use no text and save all of the text for your actual speech. Your summary should contain, first, a brief explanation of your research question. Second, a brief description of the most important sources you referenced. And third, a brief explanation of your thesis statement and, most importantly, the logic you used to defend that thesis statement. You should be prepared to answer 2 to 3 questions from the audience about your work. Your presentation will last 3 to 5 minutes, and that includes audience questions. This is not a big, in-depth, detailed speech. This is us practicing what university degree holders have to do on a much smaller scale. So let's take a look at the breakdown of scoring. 60% of your score will be based on the research paper. 40% of your score will be based on your presentation. That's kind of nice because research is tricky. If you have a research question and you start doing research, you might find that your research question needs to be altered because you learn from your research that you're on the wrong track. But the presentation is really simple and quick, and it's an easy 40% to gain. So it kind of balances out. If you struggle with research writing, no matter what you present, tell us about your struggle. It's still a valid part of the description of your research. And finally, be sure to read the scoring rubric as you prepare your work. I have written the scoring rubric. If you come to me and ask me a question that I know is answered on the scoring rubric, I am not going to respond except to say, go and actually read the scoring rubric. That is the expectation. So here's what the scoring rubric looks like. It is very detailed. And finally, before I sign off, I just want to show you that I've given you some help to get started. I will be referencing, and you should also reference, the Purdue Online Writing Lab for MLA formatting and style. Again, I would like to remind you that you need to turn your paper in on Turnitin. And I wanted to draw your attention to JSTOR. If you are worried about whether or not a source is reliable, skip Google and go straight to JSTOR, a database of scholarly journal articles that SAC has already paid for. Here's the username and password for you. I would just at least try finding one source on JSTOR. If you are university bound and you are a serious student, you should try finding most of your sources on scholarly journal databases like this in preparation for higher education. And finally, to help you get started with your preliminary research, I have listed, and they're mostly videos, 10, so here's the other 4 of them, different sources that you can begin with. So pick a few that sound interesting, start learning, narrowing down your research, and then get started with focusing and doing more focused research before you go through the rest of the writing process. I'm really excited about this project, primarily because the topic, which we talked about at length in our Socratic seminar about the blind Argentinian football team, is something that doesn't matter just because we're doing a research project. It matters for our lifelong. It matters because we want to be good human beings. It matters because conducting service that preserves human dignity, especially for the people we're serving, is so, so important. We left that Socratic seminar not really knowing how to do that. So I'm hoping that this research project provides us with a lot of different answers to that question. Thanks so much and have fun.